Enki designed two versions of humanity. The first one was erased within a single generation, and the cuneiform tells us why. This is the part of the Sumerian creation account the standard translations skip. Two creations, one species, and a god who decided to start over before the first version could finish its first lifetime. What did the first humanity do that was so dangerous Enki erased them within 30 years? Why does the tablet at Nippur describe them in past tense before they were even adults? And what specific change did Enki make to the second version that we are still walking around carrying inside us today? The answer is on a tablet held in the Penn Museum in Philadelphia, translated by the late Samuel Noah Kramer himself, and on the Atrahasis Epic in the British Museum's Igigi collection. Both texts agree. The standard story you have heard is this. Enki, the Sumerian god of wisdom and fresh water, was given the task of creating humanity. He took clay from the Abzu, the underground sea, and mixed it with the blood of a slain god. He shaped the mixture into beings with hands and breath and intention, and gave them to the lesser gods to use as labor, so that the lesser gods would no longer have to dig irrigation canals themselves. This is the version most people know. It is the version on the surface of the Atrahasis Epic. But the Atrahasis Epic was not the first creation account the Sumerians wrote. The first one is a tablet known as Enki and Mami, recovered from the city of Nippur in the late 19th century and currently held in the Penn Museum in Philadelphia under the catalogue number CBS 14068. The tablet was translated definitively by the great Sumerologist Samuel Noah Kramer in the 1940s, and what it describes is not a single creation event. It describes two. In the first creation, Enki shapes humanity from clay alone. No god's blood, no mixed essence, just the raw material of the Abzu, given form, given breath, given a place on the earth. The text calls these first beings Namlu Ulu, a Sumerian compound translators usually render flatly as humanity, but which literally means the people of the first day. They are referred to throughout the opening of the tablet using a verbal aspect that Sumerian grammar reserves for entities the speaker considers no longer extant. The cuneiform describes the first humans in past tense before the creation narrative is even complete. Then, partway through the tablet, the text breaks. Enki goes to sleep. His mother, the goddess Namu, comes to him in a dream. She tells him the first creation has failed and that he must rise and shape another. The second creation, this time, is mixed with the blood of the slain god Wei-Ila. The mixed essence humans are given to Mami to assist in the design. They become the second version, the version we descend from. Between the two creations, in the gap the text refuses to fully explain, an entire generation of the first humanity lived and was erased. The question the tablet leaves open, the question Sumerologists have argued about for 80 years, is what the first version did that was so wrong it had to be undone before its members reached adulthood. The Atrahasis Epic, the longer creation account preserved on tablets in the British Museum's Igigi collection, gives us a partial answer. In Atrahasis, the lesser gods, the Igigi, go on strike. They refuse to keep digging the irrigation canals. They throw down their tools and march on the temple of Enlil, the chief god, and they demand to be relieved of their labor. The senior gods agree. They commission Enki to create humans specifically to take over the digging. Humans, in the Atrahasis framework, are not made for their own sake. They are made because the gods are tired. But Atrahasis tells us something else, in a passage most translators bury in the footnotes. After the first humans are made, they do not work. The text says they gather and listen. They watch the sky. They build small cairns of stone and arrange them in the patterns of the constellations. They speak a language the gods did not give them, and they do not pick up the tools. Enlil, not Enki, but Enlil, the chief god, becomes enraged. He tells Enki, "The clay you mixed has come to itself." They are not workers. They are watchers. Unmake them and begin again. This is the moment of erasure. The Sumerian word for what Enki does next is gu-mu-ub-tag, which is normally rendered "he sent them away." But the verbal root in the late 3rd millennium dialect of Eridu carries a far heavier meaning. It is the same verb used elsewhere in the cuneiform corpus to describe what happens to grain in a flooded field. The first humanity, in the verb the Sumerians chose, was dispersed into the soil. Within a single generation, the text specifies U for Niginna, the cycle of one lifetime, the first humans were gone. What did they discover that made Enlil order them erased? The cuneiform does not say directly, but it says one thing that has unsettled every scholar who has read it carefully. In the final fragment of the relevant section of Enki and Mami, before the tablet breaks, the first humans are described as kneeling in the direction the gods had not yet told them to face. They were worshipping, but not the Anunnaki. Something else. Something the Anunnaki had not introduced them to. Something the second creation was specifically designed to never be able to perceive. This is where the two tablets converge into a single, coherent, and disturbing picture. When Enki begins the second creation, the text is explicit that he changes the recipe. The clay is the same. The breath is the same. But this time, the blood of a god is mixed in. We-Ila, sometimes rendered Geshtu-e, is the god the senior council selects to be slaughtered for the purpose. The cuneiform name, We-Ila itself, is meaningful. Ila is God. We is the cry of grievance. He is, literally, the god of grievance. His blood, the text says, becomes the Atemu of humanity, the ghost. The thing inside us that remembers it once was something else and grieves what it has lost without knowing what was lost. The second humanity carries that grief, but it also carries what Enki specifically designed into it to make sure the failure of the first version would not repeat. The Atrahasis tablet uses a phrase no other Sumerian text uses. It calls the second humans Giri Zal Sashu, the bound feet. They could work, they could build, they could obey, they could even become priests. But they could not, the text says, kneel in the direction the gods had not yet told them to face. A specific perceptual capacity that the first humanity had, the second humanity does not. What was it? The cuneiform here is genuinely fragmentary. The most common scholarly reading, given by Andrew George in his 2003 critical edition of Atrahasis, suggests it was a form of direct perception of the divine, the ability to encounter the sacred without an intermediary. The first humans, in this reading, did not need temples. They did not need priests. They did not need the Anunnaki to tell them where the holy was. They could see it themselves, and they were turning, as a species, towards something the Anunnaki had not authorized. So Enki erased them. And he built a second version that could only ever encounter the sacred through the institutions the Anunnaki controlled, the temples, the priesthood, the festivals, the descent of kingship from heaven. This is the version of humanity that built Sumer, that built every city after. That 4,500 years later is still walking around with the Atemu Awe Ila inside it, the grief that does not know what it grieves, and a built-in inability to see what the first version was beginning to see when Enki ordered them dispersed into the soil. So who were the first humans Enki designed, and what did they perceive that was so dangerous Enlil ordered them erased within a generation? Maybe the Namlu Ulu are a mythological abstraction, a pre-narrative the Sumerians invented to explain why their second humans were imperfect rather than perfect. Maybe Kramer's translation of the past tense aspect in Enki and Mami was overzealous. Maybe Andrew George's reading of Giri Zal Sashu, the bound feet, is too literal. Maybe the kneeling in the wrong direction line is just a poetic flourish. But the Sumerians did not write two creation accounts. They wrote one in two parts, and they put the first part on a tablet they buried so deep at Nippur that the late 19th century was the first time human eyes had read it in 3,500 years. They told us their gods made humanity twice. They told us the first version was erased before its members were grown. They told us the second version was redesigned to never again see what the first version had been beginning to see. And they told us, in the Atemu of We-Ila, the ghost of the grieving god woven into our second version blood, that we would feel the absence of that perception for the rest of our species' existence, and we would not know what we were missing. Subscribe, because in the next episode we open the rest of Enki and Mami. We translate the 7 defective humans Ninmah and Enki designed afterward in their drunken contest. And we examine the 3 other Sumerian creation tablets that, in their fragmentary opening lines, refer to a first humanity that the standard mythological surveys have quietly chosen not to include in the published canon. The first version was erased, the second version was redesigned, and the direction the first humanity was kneeling toward 4,500 years ago is still somewhere beneath the sand of southern Iraq, exactly where it always was.